Alright, let's talk about a time when rock music wasn't just a genre, it was a revolution. Picture this, 1965, the mid-60s, and the world is on the edge of something huge. You've heard the stories, but have you ever stopped to think about why those songs from that era still feel like they're screaming at you through a speaker? It's not just nostalgia. These tracks were built on raw energy, rebellion, and a hunger to break every rule. And today, we're diving into 4 songs that didn't just define their time, they invented the future of rock. Let me tell you why this matters. Personal opinion, these aren't just classic songs. They're the DNA of everything you love in modern music, from punk to hip-hop. Let's unpack it. Take the Kinks, Where Have All the Good Times Gone? This isn't just a song, it's a time machine. You hear that jangly guitar, that snarling rhythm, and you're instantly transported to a world where rock was still figuring out its identity. But here's what's fascinating, the Kinks didn't just copy their peers, they redefined what rock could be. Their use of distortion? It wasn't just noise, it was a statement. They were the first to weaponize feedback, turning it into a tool for chaos. And yet, they were banned from the US for being too wild. What does that say about the cultural divide of the time? It's wild to think that the same band who helped shape rock sound were seen as troublemakers. In my opinion, that contradiction is what made them so iconic. They weren't just musicians, they were rebels with a cause. Now, let's talk about the Beach Boys and Wouldn't It Be Nice? This track is a masterclass in emotional engineering. How do you take harmonies that sound like sunlight and turn them into something haunting? The Beach Boys did it by blending innocence with melancholy. Pet Sounds wasn't just an album, it was a blueprint for how pop music could become art. And here's the kicker, this was 1966. The same year that saw the rise of psychedelic experimentation, and yet the Beach Boys were already pushing boundaries with layered vocals and unconventional arrangements. What many people don't realize is that this album was almost shelved. The label thought it was too weird. But the genius of Brian Wilson was that he didn't care about trends, he was building something timeless. That's why, even now, when you hear those harmonies, it feels like a hug and a punch to the gut at the same time. Then there's the Beatles and Help. This isn't just a catchy tune, it's a snapshot of a band at the height of their powers. You know the story, John Lennon's plea for help, the frantic guitar riffs, the way it bridges their earlier rock roots with the more experimental sounds that would follow. But here's what I find fascinating, Help was the first Beatles album to be written entirely by the band themselves. No more relying on outside songwriters. This was their declaration of independence. And let's be real, this track is the sound of a generation in crisis. The 60s were a time of upheaval, and the Beatles weren't just reflecting that, they were leading the charge. If you take a step back and think about it, this song is the bridge between the innocence of their early days and the complexity of their later work. It's a reminder that even the most iconic bands have to evolve, or they get left behind. And finally, Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues. This isn't just a song, it's a manifesto. Dylan took poetry, stripped it down to its bare bones, and threw it into a rock framework. The result? A track that feels like a spoken-word performance set to a beat. Now, here's a question, was this the first rap song? Some say yes. Others argue it's just Dylan's way of pushing boundaries. But regardless of the answer, what this really suggests is that Dylan was never just a folk singer. He was a provocateur, a poet, and a pioneer who blurred the lines between genres. And this track? It's the moment when rock music became a vehicle for social commentary. You can hear the urgency in his voice, the way he's practically shouting at the listener. It's not just music, it's a call to action. So what's the bigger picture here? These 4 songs didn't just define the mid-60s, they laid the groundwork for everything that came after. From the distortion of the Kinks to the harmonies of the Beach Boys, the evolution of the Beatles, and the poetic grit of Dylan, each of these tracks represents a different facet of rock's soul. And if you take a step back and think about it, they're all still relevant today. Why? Because they were never just about the music. They were about feeling, raw, unfiltered, and utterly human. So next time you hear one of these songs, don't just listen. Feel it. Because that's how revolutions are born.